My name is Michael Grayson. I am a journalist who has always lived for puzzles and mysteries, even though this often led me into dangerous waters. My obsession with the unknown, especially the dark and hidden corners of the internet, sometimes seemed inappropriate even to myself. But I couldn't stop. I was most drawn to places where myths intertwined with reality, and the truth lay hidden beneath layers of lies. And that's exactly what happened once when I stumbled upon something that changed my life. A mysterious website called Lake City Quiet Pills. It all began completely by chance, as many of my investigations often did. I was browsing through old discussions on Reddit, looking for material for a new article. It was an innocent habit, but my intuition often found intriguing leads where others saw only informational noise. And then, in the comments, I saw a mention from a user named Iron Surge. His words stopped me in my tracks. If you want a real mystery, look up the website Lake City Quiet Pills. The name sounded strange, almost ominous. Quiet Pills of the Lake. Something about it felt unsettling and at the same time irresistibly intriguing. I needed to find out what it was. I first opened the site late at night, with no light in the room except for the bluish glow of my laptop screen illuminating the space. At first glance, it was a simple and outdated resource, as if it had been transported from the 1990s. Its main page consisted of crude text and a few links to image galleries. No bright elements, nothing to attract the attention of a modern user. But there was something odd about the way the site looked. It seemed as though it had been deliberately designed to appear old and simple, to avoid drawing attention. I tried to convince myself that it was just an ordinary archival photo page. But the name wouldn't let me rest. It sounded as though it hid some dark and sinister story. After a few minutes of browsing the site, I decided to dig deeper. Using an old, almost forgotten source code editor, I began to explore the structure of the page. And that's when something unexpected happened. I stumbled upon hidden messages. Their text was invisible to the ordinary visitor, but to me, it was like a silent whisper from someone who wanted to leave their traces behind. The messages seemed innocuous, short job postings that made no sense at first glance. Loaders needed. Experience in hot zones required. High pay. Another message. Urgent. Looking for people who can work without asking questions. It puzzled me. At first I thought it was just some kind of joke. Maybe someone had forgotten these lines while testing. But the more I read, the less innocent they seemed. The deeper I dug, the stronger my feeling grew that I had stumbled upon something more than just an old photo page. It looked like real job postings for mercenaries. And although I had always considered myself a rational person, cold sweat began to drip down my forehead. I felt like I was standing on the brink of something dangerous, something that could change everything. But I couldn't stop. This was just the beginning. A few sleepless nights, with only the dim light of my laptop screen and half-empty coffee cups scattered around me, helped piece together the first fragments of this puzzle. I sifted through codes and archives, trying to assemble something that made sense. Almost all the hidden messages on the site contained dates and locations, but they were so vague and cryptic that I couldn't determine their purpose. From time to time, I felt like I was wasting my time, but something deep in my mind stubbornly screamed, "Don't stop." Pushing through layers of comments and links, I found a reference to a user with a strange name, Milo's Keeper. This enigmatic figure seemed to be the key to understanding what was happening on the site. Every mention of him hinted that he was either a moderator or the founder of Lake City Quiet Pills. Other comments described him as someone who always knew how to solve problems. But this problem-solving sounded too mysterious, as if it hinted at some shadowy operations. My search led to even stranger discoveries. In the site's code, I found lines that seemed to point to dates and events, but at first they made no sense. However, when I began comparing these dates to real-world events, things became much darker. One date caught my attention in particular. It coincided with the day news outlets reported the death of a diplomat in a car accident. It was a typical, unfortunate accident, but something about it didn't sit right with me. The reports described the incident as a brake failure. At the time, I thought nothing of it. But when I discovered another date on the site that aligned with a restaurant bombing on the other side of the world, my doubts began to solidify into certainty. It seemed that all these events were not coincidences. They matched the dates I found on Lake City Quiet Pills. I decided to delve deeper. I pulled news archives from the past few years and began searching for similar coincidences. The results were unsettling. Every reference date corresponded to events that might have seemed random to anyone else. But in my mind, a clear picture began to form. These were deliberate operations. The dates I saw on the site were often accompanied by phrases like party or project completion. Under these words, I started to realize lay the true meaning. These events marked moments when assassinations, accidents, or explosions occurred, leaving no traces or suspicions. The more I uncovered, the more my fear turned into obsession. I had the feeling that I was brushing against something so dark and dangerous that it could swallow me whole at any moment. But it was too late to turn back. I didn't just want to solve this mystery. I felt as though I had already become a part of it. I began to suspect that Lake City Quiet Pills wasn't just a website. It was a portal to an underground world of mercenaries, where decisions were made silently, leaving no noise or evidence behind. And I was too close to stop now. My investigation had pulled me deeper than I could have ever imagined. What initially seemed like an innocent mystery had turned into a deadly game, and I could no longer retreat. To protect my work, I set up a virtual server, hiding my actions behind layers of anonymity. But even then, I felt as though I was constantly being watched, as if every move I made was under surveillance. My suspicions were confirmed a few days later. One morning, when I opened my email inbox, I was greeted by a message. It had no signature, but its content was clear and chilling. "Stop digging, or this will end worse for you than you can imagine." My heart pounded in my chest as if it were about to leap out. Someone knew what I was trying to uncover, and this someone clearly didn't want me to continue. For a moment I hesitated. Was it worth the risk to go further? But fear quickly gave way to anger. Whoever was behind this didn't know who they were dealing with. I had played these kinds of games before, and I always won. Instead of stopping, I dug even deeper. That's when I found information that sent a chill down my spine. It turned out that Milo's Keeper was linked to the high-profile assassination of a Palestinian leader in Dubai. I recalled how the event was covered in the news, a targeted attack carried out with impeccable precision. Security cameras at the hotel captured a team of individuals operating like a finely tuned machine. Their actions were so professional that it looked more like a scene from a movie than real life. The group entered and exited without causing a stir, leaving almost no trace. Almost, but not entirely. Interestingly, they left behind a digital footprint online, one eerily similar to what I had seen on Lake City Quiet Pills. The style was identical: hidden messages, encrypted instructions, and hints understood only by those who knew what to look for. And while the police never figured out who was behind the attack, I was convinced that it was the work of people connected to that website. My theory was taking shape. Lake City Quiet Pills wasn't just a mysterious corner of the internet. It was a database, a hidden platform for those who handled the dirtiest of jobs: mercenaries, assassins, professional agents. The site was their means of communication, organization, and coordination. And Milo's Keeper seemed to be one of the key players in this system. But another question haunted me. Why had they taken notice of me specifically? Had I gone too far? Or perhaps someone among them believed I was getting too close to uncovering their secrets. Either way, one thing became clear. I wasn't just searching for answers anymore. I had become part of the game, a game where the stakes were deadly high. And I was ready to see it through to the end. The deeper I delved, the stronger the feeling grew that I was no longer in control of the situation. Instead of untangling the mystery, I found myself ensnared in its eerie and dangerous details. It felt as though I was uncovering not just hidden information, but entire layers of truth that were meant to remain buried forever. My search led me to expenditure lists hidden in the site's code. At first glance, they seemed like innocent financial reports. But as I began reading between the lines, the terms used became disturbingly familiar. Operation Cleanup Support. Each phrase sounded as if it had been lifted from military protocols. But here they referred to some shadowy dealings. Some entries mentioned equipment, extraction, expenses, and even code names. One day, I stumbled upon an encrypted file that appeared to be a list of names. But as I quickly realized, most of these names weren't real, they were pseudonyms. Out of curiosity, I started investigating whether these pseudonyms had any connection to real people or events. One name caught my attention. Mirror. There was something strangely familiar about it, though I couldn't immediately place where I had heard it before. I spent the next few days digging, poring over archives and information on classified operations. Finally, after many sleepless nights, I stumbled upon something that shocked me. Mirror wasn't just a pseudonym, it was the name of an operation. And not just any operation, but one tied to NATO missions from a few years ago. The problem, however, was this: Operation Mirror had never officially existed. There was no mention of it in public reports, no articles, no documented confirmation. It was a secret known only to a select few. But I managed to piece together some fragmented details. The operation, as I understood it, was linked to the elimination of a high-profile target in the Middle East. It was an unofficial mission, carried out without any formal approval. It was so classified that even those involved didn't know the full scope of the operation. Understanding how this mission was connected to Lake City Quiet Pills was difficult. But the more I dug, the more hints I uncovered. The expenditures listed in the site's code matched the presumed dates of Operation Mirror. Moreover, one of the pseudonyms mentioned in the file had previously appeared in reports linked to NATO operations. There was no doubt left in my mind: those behind Lake City Quiet Pills weren't just mercenaries. They operated at a level most ordinary people couldn't even fathom. Their influence and connections reached into the highest circles. With each new discovery, I felt the noose tightening around my neck. I was playing a game with no room for mistakes, and I wasn't sure if I would make it out alive. My search finally led me to a real person who could shed light on this sinister world. Through a few contacts I found on anonymous forums, I arranged a meeting with a former military man who claimed to have heard of Milo's keeper. His name was Derek, and even over the phone, it was clear he was nervous. "This isn't a conversation for the phone," he said before abruptly hanging up. We agreed to meet at a small, crowded cafe in the city center. It was a busy place, which perhaps created an illusion of safety. When I first saw Derek, he looked exhausted, with hollow eyes and trembling hands clutching a cup of coffee. He kept glancing over his shoulder, as if he were certain someone was watching him. "Why does this interest you?" were the first words he said, skipping any pleasantries. His voice was hoarse, tinged with tension. I explained everything I had uncovered about Lake City Quiet Pills and Milo's keeper, hoping it would convince him to open up. At first, he just shook his head. "You're playing with fire, kid," he muttered, staring into the distance. After a few minutes of silence, Derek finally began to speak. "That site, it's just the tip of the iceberg," he said, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "It's a front for people who handle dirty work. They do the things no government will officially sanction. They're hired for jobs that must remain in the shadows." I tried to press for more information, but Derek only shook his head. "I've already said more than I should. If I tell you any more, it could end badly for both of us." His words set me on edge. I realized he was afraid not just for himself, but also for me. Before leaving, he gave me a final warning. "Be careful, Michael. They don't like it when their business gets discussed. If you keep digging, you'll become a target yourself." That night, I couldn't sleep. Derek's words echoed in my mind. Every hint he dropped only deepened my suspicions. Lake City Quiet Pills wasn't just a website. It was a mechanism controlling a network that operated on a global scale. But morning brought horrifying news. A headline flashed across my news feed. "Man found dead under suspicious circumstances in his home. Police suspect suicide." It was Derek. When I read the report, my stomach knotted. He had warned me of the danger, and now he was gone. This couldn't be a coincidence. Someone knew he had spoken to me, and someone wanted him silenced. I sat in the darkness of my room, staring at the words on the news article glowing on my screen. Instead of fear, I felt something else, anger and determination. Derek was gone, but I knew he had opened a door for me into something vast and terrifying. I had come too far to turn back now. I had only one choice left: to uncover the truth. Everything I had learned was too important and too dangerous to leave in the shadows. I knew I could no longer handle this alone. Sharing my investigation with people I trusted seemed like the only logical step. I reached out to a few journalist colleagues with whom I had a history of working on major exposés. They were skeptical, but intrigued. We spent several days working tirelessly, creating backups of all the evidence I had gathered. We duplicated the data onto different drives, created encrypted archives, and stored them in multiple cloud repositories. Each file was a document that could shine a light on the secrets of Lake City quiet pills, encrypted messages, list of names, expenditures for operations, and code names pointing to lethal missions. We understood that this was more than an investigation. It was a challenge to those who believed their deeds would remain forever hidden. All that remained was finding a way to make this information public. But the closer we got to that moment, the more I felt like we were being watched. I couldn't shake the sense that every step I took was known to someone else. On several occasions, my laptop behaved strangely, sudden errors, programs crashing without explanation. It could have been paranoia, but by now, I knew it was better to be cautious. One evening, after another long day of working on the story, I returned home to something that made me freeze. On my laptop screen was a message. It hadn't been sent via email, chat, or any browser window. It simply appeared as a text box on a blank background. The message was short, but its content sent a chill down my spine. "You've taken your first and final step toward the truth." Cold sweat trickled down my back. This couldn't be a coincidence. Someone not only knew what I was doing but was bold enough to let me know. This was both a challenge and a warning. I quickly shut down the laptop, removed the battery, and began scanning the room. My paranoia reached its peak. Were they physically watching me? Did they know where I was? I walked to the window and peered out into the darkness of the street, searching for any sign of surveillance. But there was nothing. No movement. Yet it brought no relief. I knew that in this game, my opponent was far more professional. And now I was certain, they didn't just know about me, they were ready to act. That evening marked the point of no return. I realized that my next step could be my last if I wasn't careful. But it didn't stop me. The truth had to come to light, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to make it happen. Even if it meant risking everything. My life had become a living nightmare. What began as an investigation had turned into a struggle for survival. I no longer had a place I could call safe. My home, once my fortress, was now a stark reminder that I had nowhere to hide. The first ominous sign was when my laptop went missing. I had left it at home, as usual, on my desk. When I returned, it was gone. The doors and windows were locked, with no signs of forced entry. This could mean only one thing. Someone had entered with professional precision, leaving nothing but emptiness in their wake. It wasn't just the laptop. There were signs that someone had gone through my papers, searching for something specific. But what? Was it simply a demonstration of their power? Soon, I began receiving alarming news about my friends who had been helping with the investigation. They were disappearing one by one. At first, it was vague messages like, "He's not responding." Then it became clear. One of them had vanished without a trace. No leads, no explanations. Another was taken out of town by unknown individuals and managed to call me only once, saying, "They know everything. Get out while you can." Those were the last words I heard from him. Each disappearance cut through me like a blade. These people had trusted me. They became part of this fight, and now they were paying the ultimate price. The guilt gnawed at me from within, but at the same time, it fueled my determination. I had to see this investigation through. If I stopped now, all their sacrifices would be in vain. The more I analyzed the situation, the clearer it became that the organization I was up against had no limits. They had boundless resources. They could infiltrate anywhere, erase any traces, eliminate any threats. And I, it seemed, was next on their list. But that only strengthened my resolve. Every step I took now was fraught with danger. I changed my residence, leaving no trace of my movements. I had to abandon comfort, sever ties with friends, and let go of everything that made me who I was. I became a shadow of myself, but it was a necessity to survive. Still, even in this darkness, I held on to hope. The truth had to come out. And I knew that if I fell, it would only mark the beginning of their end. One evening, as I sifted through the remnants of files I had managed to salvage, I stumbled upon something that made me freeze. Among the encrypted documents I had painstakingly unlocked was a file that, at first glance, appeared to be an ordinary list. But its contents sent a chill through my veins. It was a list of names. Surnames and titles belonging to people of power, influence, and global recognition. Politicians, businessmen, corporate leaders. The more I scrolled through this list, the harder my heart pounded. These names weren't random. Every individual on the list was significant in global politics, economics, or geopolitics. And each name was accompanied by short notes. Threat, target, preparation for elimination. One name, in particular, caught my attention. It was a name everyone knew. A figure who frequently appeared in the news, renowned for reforms and decisions that impacted millions. For several minutes, I stared at the screen, struggling to grasp the reality. This leader was marked as a target. And that could mean only one thing: the organization was planning their assassination. In that moment, I realized I had uncovered something far bigger than a conspiracy. This was a global network operating beyond any laws, governments, or morality. They weren't just killing for money or personal interests. They were manipulating the world, influencing political decisions, economies, and even military conflicts. Their actions were so masterfully concealed that no one even suspected their existence. They were the invisible architects of chaos. I sat in the darkness, staring at the list. Each name was a shadow looming over the world. But what tormented me most were the questions: why these people? Were their deaths part of some intricate plan? And most importantly, did I have even the slightest chance of stopping this? The realization of how vast this game was made me feel like a mere pawn on their chessboard. But at the same time, it gave me purpose. If I couldn't stop them on my own, at the very least, I could take the first step. I could expose them. I decided to disappear. The only way out was to flee to a place where I would be harder to find. A small town, tucked away among rolling hills, seemed like the perfect choice. There were no surveillance cameras on every corner, no bustling crowds, and life moved quietly and at its own pace. But even there, amidst the silence and isolation, I never felt safe. I rented a room in an old motel on the outskirts of town. The room was shabby, with peeling wallpaper and a musty smell of dust, but it was inconspicuous enough to serve as my temporary hideout. Each evening, I drew the heavy curtains across the windows and checked the locks on the door multiple times to make sure they were secure. Yet it brought me no comfort. The feeling of being watched never left me. Every unfamiliar car passing by the motel, every glance from a stranger on the street felt menacing. I rarely left the room, ordering food to be delivered and venturing outside only at night when the streets were nearly deserted. My phone was my only connection to the outside world, but even that I used sparingly. I knew that any connection to the network could reveal my location. Yet I couldn't remain silent. I knew that there were still a few friends waiting for me, the few who hadn't disappeared or been put in harm's way. My last message to them was simple and concise. If I'm gone, find out what happened. These words were more than a plea. They were my will. I understood that I might be the next target, and I wanted them to know it wouldn't be an accident. My fear had turned into resolve. If I were to fall, I would make sure they uncovered the truth. That evening, I sat by the window for a long time, gazing out at the empty street bathed in semi-darkness. The night was quiet, broken only by the occasional sound of a distant car. But even this quiet felt deceptive. Something was off. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone already knew where I was. That my time was running out. And I was right. My final entry was the culmination of everything I had endured and uncovered. I knew I couldn't delay any longer. The feeling that they were closing in on me was so intense that every passing minute felt like a gift from fate. I didn't know how much time I had left, but I realized I had to take the most important step: deliver the truth to the world. I spent hours gathering what remained of my materials: decrypted files, operational details, lists of names, and code names for missions. Among them was a file I considered the most dangerous. It contained detailed plans of the organization's operations, dates, locations, targets, and even descriptions of the methods used for eliminations. It was proof that this organization wasn't just a group of mercenaries, but a global system manipulating politics and people's lives on an unimaginable scale. I uploaded the file to a secure platform and shared the link on social media using an anonymous account. The caption was simple but shocking. "This is the truth they don't want you to know." My heart raced as I hit publish. Within minutes, the link began to spread. I watched as people started downloading the file, sharing it, and discussing it in the comments. I thought I had succeeded. The world would know the truth. But within minutes, something went wrong. The file disappeared from the platform. The page returned a 404 error, as if it had never existed. I checked the backup links, but they, too, were gone. Within 10 minutes of my post, there was no trace of it left. This was impossible. I had taken every precaution, used the best anonymity tools, yet they had still found and deleted the file. Their response was lightning fast, too fast for it to be a coincidence. It was a display of their power, their control. My fear deepened when I noticed my anonymous account had been blocked, and my device began emitting strange signals. I could no longer stay where I was. My data had been breached, my location compromised. My final post was published just hours before I disappeared. My friends tried to find me, but all traces ended in that small town where I had been hiding. Only a handful of people managed to download the file before it vanished. Rumors about it spread, but the file itself was inaccessible. Some claimed it exposed a global conspiracy, while others were convinced it was a hoax. The world learned fragments of what I had uncovered, but it wasn't enough. My records became nothing more than a shadow of the truth I had tried to share. And now, I was just another piece of the mystery no one could solve. But was it truly the end? Had they really won? Perhaps they erased the file. Perhaps I am gone. But the truth, it always finds a way. And if someone stumbles upon my story, my investigation, it could be the beginning of the end for them. What will be your response if you find out that this is true?